Hi, my name is Alinta. I'm originally from Australia and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging on unceded Yugambeh land where I grew up. I'm a media artist with a PhD in animal-computer interaction as creative practice. I'm interested in the environment, the welfare of other species, the politics and ethics of helping others, and how these notions can be expressed or even potentially helped through arts practices. And I volunteer to rehabilitate bats. Essentially, I want my works to have relevance amongst a wider, multi-species community. This particular project looks to the potentials of machine learning for creating artistic and poetic interspecies communication devices. Science fiction has long imagined a Babel fish that allows translation of multiple species. Such devices could very well shift entire perceptions, ethics, and understandings. Of course, the communication methods, signals, and umwelt of different species can be complex and unknowable, and many will say impossible to translate or express in a human language. I also fervently believe that humans do already communicate quite effectively with certain species based on our anthropological history, animal behavioral research, or kinship. But the rewards of attempting other ways of understanding others are vast when that understanding is aimed at care rather than at use. Machine learning in my work relates to the creation of AI models that can learn a series of given audio classifications, tell the difference between them, and for the most part understand the difference between these classifications and other background audio. When applied to animal vocalizations, this means a machine that can learn and categorize the vocalizations that are given to it, hear the differences between them, and choose a text output that it knows is associated with the vocalization it hears, all in real time. It does not do this alone. It does what I train it to do, meaning it is still up to me to make the bioacoustic recordings, classify them correctly, learn everything I can about the species and the meanings or contexts behind their vocalizations, write the translations, and tell the machine which translation fits with which vocalization. This is already possible, as shown through the pilot project of my fellowship, where 7 grey-headed flying fox signals returned poetic translations depending on their behavioral contexts. In other words, what we know flying foxes are doing when they make those vocalizations. This is based on predefined scientific literature mixed with my own long-term work in bat rehabilitation care. For the other species I will be looking at, I'm more reliant on scientific literature performed by others, but I have lived with and around most of these species for my entire life. For the final piece for my fellowship, I'm aiming to expand beyond grey-headed flying foxes and include Australian magpies, butcherbirds, Egyptian fruit bats, noisy minor honeyeaters, and extinct species. The extinct species AI model is more conceptual, as the point is that it will never truly work as intended. Having reflected on the flying fox pilot, I have now designed the overall aesthetic of the work and developed an opening scene and menu system for users to navigate between different species, and I currently have working AI models for the grey-headed flying fox, the butcherbird, and the noisy miner, so I'm almost halfway completed. My project includes 2 species with highly complex, combinatory, and improvisational vocalizations. As audio machine learning with TensorFlow struggles to account for this complexity, this is quite experimental and has required a very different method when it comes to how translations are written. I test each model by asking it to display a number that corresponds to a trained vocalization, then I play vocalizations to it to see what number it displays. If it displays the correct number, I know it's working. For the more complex species, such as the butcherbird, it will often switch between 2 or 3 numbers in quick succession before settling on one. But I think this is okay, as it shows there are several different pieces of vocalization being weaved together, and I just need to account for this when writing translations. This project is essentially an AI-driven net artwork in that it functions via the web and a mobile phone's microphone, which will make it freely available to the world of smartphone users. Because the device must listen in real time in order to function, this means it should arguably be used in the vicinity of the species in question. This affects the aesthetic of the work. So far, the aesthetic is very text-based, with predominantly dark colors, minimal movement, and no sound, because some of the animals involved are mainly nocturnal. It would need need to be visually and audibly non-disturbing when being used near those species, though I am wondering if I need to add auditory interest for the human perceiver and essentially create a different version of the work for an art gallery audience. I have now gathered essentially all the audio data I need from these species, including my own field recordings, some from the Creative Commons, and with the help of bat researchers who have given me bioacoustic data for the Egyptian fruit bat. But I have been learning lots of cool things that I didn't know through my vocalization literature review, such as, did you know, the Australian magpies who spent the most time creating improvised complex songs for their aesthetic qualities alone, or you might say simply for the fun of doing so, are the aunties who support other families but never have chicks of their own. These are the strongest musicians of the Aussie magpie world and have some of the most complex vocalizations on the planet. My project also finds it particularly important to consider the ethical impacts of AI on other species and aims to promote ethical data gathering methods. Last month I gave a hybrid workshop called the Animal Centered AI Jam, which took place at the Animal Computer Interaction ACM conference. The workshop aimed to bring together AI experts, animal ethics experts, and artists and designers to create their own vision of what I'm making for my fellowship, a conceptual use of AI for other species, and we particularly delved into the ethics of using AI with other species and how we could design frameworks for developing AI more carefully. And the outcomes of this have been really helpful in allowing me to think through and develop my own ideas. There are two things I'd love help with at this stage. One is I'd love more input from JavaScript experts, as there are some extra additions I'd like to make to my code that I simply don't have the skills for. The other is to chat about the aesthetic and the poetry to get at the heart of what this work will feel like for the user. So far in my journey, I've come to the realization that what is under scrutiny in this project is not just the use of machine learning, but more fundamental questions of translation, ethics, and anthropomorphism. What happens when we take animal communications as data and port them into our own subjective worldviews? There are, of course, also massive technological questions and questions of ethics that this work is bringing up, many of which I hope to delve into further in this fellowship and beyond.